This one's working. Hello? Yeah.
I wonder too if maybe you can speak to this, that many people, sort of mainstream Chinese, misunderstand the role of the Western media. I mean, sort of the Bush administration also constantly complains that the reporting is too negative. They don't focus on the positive things the U.S. is doing in Iraq, for example. In very much the same way a lot of Chinese wonder about, there's no one's reporting on the positive things happening in China. It's sort of the watchdog media versus the cheerleader media that you find more here in China. I wondered if maybe some of the panelists could speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think it's not a problem. The Western media keep focusing on the negative things about China, but I think the most important thing is that sometimes the Western media just not write about the real China, the colorful China to the outside world. Because I was in the blog conference last year in Beijing, and lots of Western TV stations and newspapers went there to write some stories or capture some things about the conference. But they don't even cover the interesting websites, the interesting independent blogs in China's blogosphere. They just focusing on the censorship things or other things. I think the Western media have already put enough attentions or way too much attentions on this kind of censorship or monitoring things. It's a good time to write about some other things to the outside world. Some other things are really happening. Some interesting things are really happening.
Could I just interpose a question there quickly, just because, because of Danwei's kind of profile and following censorship and blocking media, there's a fact that I've noticed when we started out. There was actually very little about media regulation and censorship because we were covering the internet as blogs were emerging in China, and in some ways the whole point was that, great, here's at last something that's not censored in China. And we've covered more and more of it, and part of it is because I get phone calls from the Western media saying, so YouTube is blocked, what's going on? And my interest, therefore, when these things goes up, as a natural effect of, somebody thinks my opinion is important and everybody seems to be interested in this, and why some guy in California asking me about YouTube in China. Do you think, is this, do we sometimes have in the Western media kind of a sort of an effect where there's a sheep effect, a crowd effect, that we all follow the same stories because we think they're interesting? Is that?
I actually want to pick up where Steven left off. If I were a farmer living in America's Midwest, and I read the mainstream newspapers about China, I would get the conclusion that China is this terrible, terrible place. Honestly, at least 90% of the stories that appear in the U.S. media about China are negative, and that is not true. That's not the whole China. And I know the nature of news media is probably to be a watchdog. It's the saying goes, if a dog bites a man, it's not news. It's only when the man bites the dog that's news, right? So it's only when things go wrong it becomes news. But if you report to a readership, people who know almost nothing about China, and you only focus on one aspect, they are going to get the wrong conclusion. And when you actually go to China, you will see that much of China does not fall into the stark white or stark black. In my 6 years as a journalist or commentator, I've only encountered one incident that I feel it's pure good or evil. That's last year's the Kenyan slave story. That I feel there's no shades of gray, but almost all the other stories that I've encountered fall into the shades of gray. There's a lot of nuances that you can capture, the good parts and the bad parts about a China story. But when you see some of the mainstream newspapers in China, you only see one part, and when you see some of the Western newspapers, you see the other side. The part that's missing, for me, is the most interesting part. That's the part of gray.
Okay.
Last, sorry.
No, it's just so many new questions. Yeah. Is this working? Okay. Well, what he was just saying, I mean, the great part, I mean, there's a difference also between print media and television media. Television media is always looking for drama in order to sell. And print media, I've noticed actually that there's been an incredible amount of balance in Western print media after what happened in the Highlands.
Tibet, we can say it.
In Tibet, yeah, we can say Tibet. Okay, I mean,
lock me up before you.
I mean, I'm actually reading some very intelligent stuff, even out of, God forbid, the New York Times and the Christian Science Monitor and Atlantic Monthly and various other places. I actually want to refer to the question before by that man there, and that is, I mean, I've been in China during the spy plane incident and during the Belgrade the bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade, and saw how rationality sort of really disappears and there's a tremendous emotion. And I think he was sort of referring to the Fengqing, or was it I mean, the passionate nationalistic youth. And I even worry that, I mean, there's so much pride in the Olympics and pride in the performance of the sports teams that if they don't get as many goals as they think they're going to do, that they're going to stone the sports authorities for, you know, 给中国丢脸了，我们没有成功，没有赢这个什么，you know. I mean, I'm just a little worried about. Do you see? I mean, I'm watching very carefully the Chinese blog, you know, all the fights about the Tibetan coverage and stuff like that, and I mean, you know, things are really taken out of context in a real bad way. I mean, that whole YouTube thing, and then there was a counter YouTube one by the other side, and you know, nobody even mentions the fact that nobody I think 90% of the Han Chinese in Tibet don't even speak any Dangwen or Huidu Zhangwen, and all the signs were all in Zhongwen. You know, so I just wanted to hear more comments about. Yeah, I'm just a little nervous.
The Fenching a problem?
The Fenching problem, yeah.
So I think you're the closest thing to an angry young nationalist here, Steven. So, at least in age. Would you like to? Are the Fenching a problem?
I mean, like if the Japanese won a gold medal in something that the Chinese were expecting to, is there going to be some sort of real nasty, unsportsmanlike conduct? Okay.
Well, I think Fenqing is a serious problem of today's China, and I think sometimes the young people are so passionate and they don't know how to release. They just say some curse words online, and they sometimes they cannot get enough information about what are really happening in the outside world, and the teachers will not tell them, the parents will not tell them, and the TV stations and traditional media cannot tell them what's really happening in the outside world. So I think the internet and the blogs are very good for today's young generation in China, because the new media, the internet, will speed up the information flow, and it's a window for the young people, of Chinese young people, to the outside world. They will understand what's really happening, and they will not be so angry at it.